All right, everyone. Thanks so much for coming today to our webinar, Metadata, the hidden evidence that wins the cases. While we're waiting on a couple of people just to get here before the timer runs out, I got a quick, almost icebreaker question. So, when you're going to court, do you think that analysts and attorneys, and even the client can be included in this? Do you think we should all wear matching suits? Um, Personally, I think we could. I think it's just like a team bonding thing, and it makes me feel like I'm a part of something bigger than myself. But so I accidentally did this with a client a little while ago, but then the other side wore pretty much the exact same suit. We all wore gray suits to it, and I feel like it was good, but it was still a little quirky as well. So I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. But now on to probably more relevant information. Let's talk about metadata. All right. So just as a general synopsis of what we're going to go over today, metadata is in pretty much everything, and oftentimes it's actually one of the most overlooked pieces of forensic evidence that is actually obtainable. And part of this is because there's not really a ton of tools that automatically parse it out and explain everything that's happening. There are some, tools that will give you kind of some general information, such as, EXIF tool, or, autopsy, Magna Axiom, Celebrate, other bigger name tools like that will provide you kind of base level metadata, but it's really only reading the generalized stuff. And it's not as deep into the woods as really should be getting. And part of that is because it's more of a manual uh, analysis that needs to be completed, and it's not quite automatic, such as a tool. So we're going to kind of go over a couple of the possibilities with it, how to use it in court, and as well as kind of a more practical, real-world example with a mock case. So a little bit about me. I am Cole Popkin. I am the team's senior forensic analyst. Then I also assist with the business development side of things. So client relations, expert testimony, all of that good stuff. I started off my career doing kind of more of the public sector, working for law enforcement. I've been in the private world for a couple of years now. Yeah, so excited to be here, and thanks all for coming. Okay, let's just kind of do some bare bones basics. What is metadata? Simply defined, this is data about data, hidden information in every digital file. So where it can be found, kind of, the most basic form of metadata that's seen is when you take a picture on your phone and it shows the timestamp, the location, uh, and even the GPS coordinates or location data. However, people don't often realize that it's actually also found in pretty much any file. So this is any PDF document, any Excel spreadsheet, any Microsoft Word document. It's in emails, it's in videos. Apps will contain metadata and the logs, various sensors and weather apps, call logs, fitness trackers. Pretty much anything is going to contain metadata these days. All right. Why is metadata important in litigation, or how can it be used in litigation? The two most, overarching strategies, if you will, that we'll use metadata for is going to be with timeline recreation. So a lot of cases hinder on, okay, who opened the file at this time, or where was this person at this point in time? When was this file transferred? When was this downloaded? All of this can be built out in kind of a chronological timeline or an order of events. The other kind of more common area that metadata is used is going to be in file manipulation. So I'm sure we've all had it at some point, especially if you're a criminal defense attorney, where body cam footage is presented or CCTV footage is presented, and it's no, that was altered. That was AI. That was I don't know. I'm sure we all have heard a number of crazy stories. They're kind of fun, kind of entertaining at first, but they really start to weigh on you after a while. So, one way to avoid all of that would be hiring a forensic analyst to determine, hey, has this video actually been altered? Is the metadata been tampered with? It's kind of one of the other common areas that forensic analysts will intervene and determine. All right, so we're going to kind of go into what are some key different types of metadata. Um, so let's kind of, bare bones basics like we talked about. Most common example of this is going to be the cameras, right? So descriptive metadata. This is largely just going to tell you, if there's a title on the file or the photo, the author of the file, so who created it, kind of some general like timestamps, even potentially modification dates if you're doing, video editing, location data, kind of the general stuff that a tool is going to parse out for you. And again, those tools, EXIF tool, Celebrate, Magna Axiom, so on and so forth. Administrative data is a little bit more comprehensive. It's a little bit harder to reach, but still not that complex. So this will largely contain, what's the file format? What's the drive format? What's the size of the file? When was it created? So on and so forth. And then if you actually want to direct your attention at me in the bottom left corner, I'm going to kind of go over what structural metadata is. So if you have, up here, this is what humans read. It's a language called ASC2. This is just standard English. Computers read something binary, right? Ones and zeros. And then all of this, kind of in between space is hexadecimal, which is going to be where most of the metadata is found. It can be a bit of a mess of alphanumeric patterns and structures. This is where, most of the actual forensic gold, if you will, is going to be found. So kind of, an example of this is I had a case a couple months ago where I can't give, specific details, but it was a pretty big contract that was going through. And part of the contract's requirements was various checklists and authentications had to be conducted on it. So there were signature stamps on it. And one of them, the client believed was fraudulent due to some other elements that were not necessarily forensic related. So what we were able to do is break apart each and every single object or part of the PDF file, and then determine when did each one come to be. And then from there, we'll make it simple. Say the document was created on August 11th, and the date of when the file could not be changed at all, had to be submitted and finalized, was August 25th. And then we actually found out that the signature was implanted on August 18th. So right from there, if you were just to look at it in the descriptive or even the administrative side of things, it's not going to show kind of that more nitty gritty, in-depth forensic detail. But when you really get into the hex editors and the structural metadata, you're able to pick out some pretty interesting stuff. All right, guys, tragedy has struck once again. We were super excited to report that the original gem from the 2006 Steve Martin Pink Panther film was found in Steve's old locker at MGM Studios. And then 4 different authenticators were brought in to analyze, was this the real deal? However, one of them has unfortunately stolen said gem. Here is our 4 initial suspects. These are the only people that had direct access to it, apart from the studio heads, which are not considered suspects in this scenario. So, suspect number 1, or analyst 1, claims that when the gem was stolen, she was having dinner with a friend. Subject 2, or analyst 2, claims that he was on a jog at a local park. Apparently, he's been training for a marathon. I like to talk a lot about it, as marathon runners usually do. Subject 3 claims that he was out of town on a trip, taking a little vacation after some hard-earned or some hard-done analyst work. And then subject D claims that she was calling an old friend. Now, in this case, right, as I'm sure all attorneys know, people are always, more than happy to hand over their entire phone to the analyst for full file system extraction. And then in this scenario, we're just going to pretend that was sarcasm, by the way. No one ever wants to give their phone over. But then also in this scenario, we're going to pretend that bank statements don't exist, credit card statements don't exist, Every CCTV footage happened to be down that day, so none of that is going to be admissible. So all we have is their phones. So how would we actually go about analyzing and assessing each person's alibi? So luckily, when claimant one was having dinner, she took a photo of her food. And like we said before, that photo gave us an exact GPS timestamp, as well as the coordinates for where she was right around the time when. So based upon all of that, we're able to determine, where she was right during the event of the break-in. Now, subject B, luckily, has a great Fitbit that he had location data turned on. So from there, we were actually able to calculate exactly, where he was running. And then additionally, the app usage log records that he had opened his Pump Up Jams Spotify playlist right around the same time that his Fitbit says that he was on the move. So clearly, he was actually on a run. And from what it looks like, it was a relatively long run. So his alibi, does check out in this instance. Subject C, who again claimed that they were out of town on vacation, luckily, as they were pulling over, checked the weather to determine what the weather was going to be like in the neighboring city, just to plan for the next day. And in which case, we were actually able to. The nice part about a lot of phones is what they'll actually do is they can record weather data. So specifically, which region they're in, and then the region can correlate to the specific weather tower to determine where they were during separate events. So in this instance, it pinged a weather zone that was not the same weather zone that the gem was in during the time. So his alibi checks out. He probably has the best alibi as he wasn't even in the general vicinity, which we can prove. Subject D, again, who claimed that she was on an extended phone call with an old friend, potentially a love interest, wink, wink, never know. Nice part about a lot of phones is this is kind of more common with Android phones as opposed to Apple. And again, a couple of different stars need to align in order to make this work. So it's not the most reliable methodology, but it can be incredibly useful when it does work out. Is the call logs or the internal files in the phone can actually record which cell phone tower they were pinging off of during specific instances. Now, once you get out to more kind of suburban or even country areas, the location data of that becomes increasingly less and less as the tower's range covers, a broader band. However, in a more urban area, such as this incident takes place, cell phone towers will have a bit of a stronger signal, but it won't be as wide of a signal. So the radius of which it's going to cover is going to be increasingly less in more of an urban area. So upon analyzing that, because we didn't really want to have to take the time to get a whole cell phone tower extraction, we were actually able to prove that she was in a 2-mile radius of the cell phone tower. And then it just so happens that the place the gem was being stored was kind of on the outskirts of the city. So that cell phone tower that she was using doesn't actually pick up where the gem was. So that being said, who could it have been, right? No one else is a credible suspect. They all had direct access to it. One of them had to have done it. Let me know. I'll give you guys a quick kind of second to think about it. And then from there, I'll reveal the answer. But I first want to see which of you guys or which alibi seems to be the least amount strong or admissible in this instance. I'll give you a little bit of music as well while you think it out. Hopefully this doesn't distract you from concentrating. Do 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 All right, enough of that. Who do you guys think it was? Last calls in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It was B. Turns out the dummy took his training route was right along where the gem was being stored. So from there, we were able to determine, yep, this was well within the window for where the breakout occurred or the break-in occurred. So without too much difficulty, we have now claimed that suspect B is actually the main culprit. Apparently, running marathons, you have to pay for, well, just the entrance fee, extra clothing, apparently shoes run out pretty quickly. So he needed, a couple $1 million in order to pay for all of that. All right, now let's talk about how can we effectively leverage metadata strategically in litigation. Probably the most important first step that can be done after assuming we have verification to analyze everything is making sure every single file is going to be in its native format. Now, what do I mean by this? So a native format is, well, native, the original format of the file. This can get damaged incredibly easily. So, for example, let's say we're analyzing the header and the metadata of an email. When it was sent, the trace route in which it was sent, all that good information. You can't just screenshot the email or even forward the email to an analyst. It has to be actually downloaded into either an EML file format or an OST file format. The same thing can be said with, say, we're analyzing a PDF file or a Microsoft Excel file. You can't re-download said file. It has to be the original one. Usually the best way to do this is to just directly drag and drop the file into a USB drive and then ship that off to the analyst. There's a few ways you can do it through cloud. However, I found this to be predominantly kind of the most safe way to preserve the information within it. Alternatively, say for instance, again, an email. Say that the file was emailed to you. You can just either download that email or forward said email. In this case, it would actually be admissible. That way, we can preserve and download the original file. I'm sure a lot of you guys know this. ChatGPT cannot replace an attorney, just as it cannot replace an actual analyst. Metadata is not necessarily the easiest of the various forms of digital evidence to analyze. Part of this is because there's not really many tools that are out there, as we've talked about. Celebrate, Magna Axiom, EXIF, all kind of will give you kind of that base level. However, the more in-depth hex editor, file carving techniques that are going to be needed are going to be done by a trained professional, such as your lovely friends at Proven Data. As I'm sure a lot of you guys know, the moment where a lot of cases really start to fall apart is in the preliminary talks right at the beginning, which is why it's super important to almost notate everything, such as when was this created, who created it, who could have altered it, who might have altered it, who even had the authority to alter it. Is this a file that was allowed to be altered? I mean, the questions are quite endless, and largely it does depend on the various case that is at hand. All right, let's touch a little bit on some litigation strategy for these types of cases. So we've kind of talked, gone over just about how to obtain metadata and how to analyze it and how it can kind of tell a story with the gems. Now let's talk about how you can defend against metadata. Probably one of the best places to look in opposing counsel's playbook, so to speak, or how they're presenting evidence is going through how are they actually coming to these findings. Are they just uploading it into a tool? Is it one of those things to where it's kind of ambiguous as to who's telling the truth? Is it largely just making an educated guess as to something. All of this should be put in the discovery report, or I'm sorry, not the discovery report, but actually the forensic report. And then in there, the analyst largely has to go through and put in how did they actually come to the findings for each and everything that is put in there. Another kind of common thing that can be useful is actually looking at what's the structure of the file. So, for example, there's, any number of PDF versions out there. So, PDF version, 1.3 had a completely different structure, and the different, elements within the hex code that we talked about earlier are going to be different from PDF files that are in version 1.7. If the file has been opened in Adobe, it's going to leave a stamp of that. If the file has been, largely, downloaded directly from Chrome, it's going to be used in that. So figuring out the general structure of the file, that's kind of more for the analysts to determine as opposed to the average attorney. But that is one way that we're usually able to determine, well, if everything else in this case is using, software and files that were, 2022 and above, but then this structure of this PDF file is dating, back from, 2017, 2018. Well, clearly, there's something that's not entirely lining up within that. Feel free to let me know if anything, you want me to elaborate further on that. Like I said, I don't want to get too far into the weeds in regards to the nitty-gritty aspects of the forensic analysis. However, we can assist with just about any case out there. All right, let's talk about how to make sure it can actually be presented in court. I'm sure, as you guys know, what's the point of hiring an analyst, having them put all of their blood, sweat, and unfortunately a decent amount of tears into a court case if it's not going to be admissible? So the Daubert standards checklist is kind of one of the more reputable list of guidelines that analysts will try to follow. That in various forms of NIST or National Institute of Science and Technology have different ways for us to present evidence. But a couple other things that frankly should always happen and would recommend you paying for or adding on to the services is going to be peer level review. I don't know everything. And I mean, no analyst can really know anything, or everything, I should say. This is why we need people to be looking over our work. If there's any analysts that are listening, please feel free to reach out to me. Would love to assist in your peer review, as well as would love for you to assist in my peer review. One of the other, main ways just to make sure that everything can be admissible in court, and we've, touched on this a number of times already, so I won't go too far into it, is going to be making sure that you're using legitimized tools, softwares, and I'm going to throw in methodology as well in there. So tools and software, right? Celebrite is great. Magna Axiom is great. Are kind of the two general leading standards. However, the methodology, there isn't as much of a finalized general methodology for everyone to follow. With some of these cases, since frankly, the methodology hasn't been around for that long. So whenever you're bringing something into court, make sure the analyst that you're using, or if you're an analyst, make sure that you're providing everything in a step-by-step format. Because more often than not, especially, well, I guess in both criminal and civil, anything that we say can and will be used against us. Which is why we need to not only just document everything that we have listed out, but also be able to understand the work from where it's coming, which can be a little bit harder, right? So say you have a team of 4 or 5 analysts that are working on one case, as opposed to just you, making sure that you're all in alignment for, what is every step that we take? Can we collectively all decide that, blank is true, or this is true, or even we don't know for certain if this is true or not? All those are going to, save you a lot of time and energy when a case actually goes to arbitration, depositions, court, you name it. Even just discovery findings is going to play a pretty big role in that. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our webinar. Hopefully, you picked up a couple of tips and tricks. And again, I kind of a bit of a side note. Metadata forensic cases are some of my absolute favorite to do. So please, if I can assist with any case, we do complimentary free discovery evaluations for criminal defense, as well as same thing for civil litigation. Metadata forensics can be a little bit complicated. So I'd make sure that, if you are retaining a forensic analyst, make sure it's one that has, some experience with this. And then again, if you're an analyst out there who wants to get into more metadata forensics, if you have kind of a more general background with, mobile, computer, even audio, video, all of which are great, starting points, feel free to reach out to me directly. My email is cole@provendata.com. Would be happy to either connect with you. There, my LinkedIn's there as well. Happy to connect with you, share some tips, tricks, work on a couple of in-house tools that will help specifically with PDF forensics. Then additionally, if you want any catch the flag challenges, we'll be more than happy to kind of point you in the right direction, as well as, refer you to a couple other people in the industry that actually know more than I do, that have mentored me with several metadata based forensic cases. So whatever we can do to help out, please feel free to reach out. And then additionally, want to give a quick shout out to our marketing director, Laura, who put a lot of this together. Couldn't have done it without her. And then I think throughout here, we have some other general information about our firm. So not just digital forensics examinations, we also do assist with digital forensics incident response, ransomware recovery, data recovery, and some general cybersecurity practices as well, all of which we'd be happy to help you out with. Again, if you guys have any questions for me, feel free to drop them in the chat. Reach out to me at my number, which is 616-214-0540. Then also my email one more time, again, is cole@provendata. Thanks again so much for coming.